I heard Miranda's voice in a hairdresser's. She was sitting in the next room and bragged to her friend how she would destroy me and take everything, which I had been making money on for many years. We will bankrupt his mother's company. She is stupid and will not understand anything. We will buy out her company for pennies, and then we will get so rich that Ethan will be able to think about the mayor's post. And if she persists, we will make her a madwoman. Register her in a mental institution or a nursing home. My beloved called me Barbie. To everyone else I am Barbara. For over 30 years, I have been running a logistics company that is one of the most popular in the region. My long blonde hair often creates the wrong impression about me. People think that I am gullible and easy to deceive and rob. But no con artist will take everything I have earned through hard work, not even my son. It was one of those Saturday mornings when you wake up already in second gear. I had a grocery list on the fridge, a yoga class I'd been threatening to try, and a chip thumbnail flashing handle me like a faulty traffic light. I swung by the salon because my highlights were due, and frankly victory looks better with a fresh cut. The bell jingled. The place smelled like peroxide, coffee, and gossip. America's Holy Trinity. "Barb, you're 5 minutes early," chirped Nina, my colorist, slinging a cape over my shoulders like a matador about to face down a bull. She led me to chair 3, the cozy corner by the thin wall that separated us from the aesthetics room. I tossed my snow-white Mercedes key into my purse and sank into the leather like a queen on a throne of split ends. Foils rustled. Bleach bloomed cool and chemical along my scalp. As Nina sectioned my hair, voices threaded through the wall. First a bright, practiced giggle, then a voice I knew the way a mother knows the sound of a closing front door at 2 of Miranda. Sugar in public, vinegar in private, apparently. I'd met her twice. Neat manicure, neat answers, neat little stories about growing up everywhere and nowhere. And how she loved Ethan's devotion to family. She'd brought lemon bars the first time. The pan was still in my freezer, wrapped in foil labeled Miranda's. I had been saving it for a future that apparently did not include me. She didn't know I was in chair 3 inches and drywall away. She didn't know my hearing has only improved with age and some well-placed skepticism. She didn't know I had stuffed my face behind a glossy Vogue, pretending to read about fall knits while my mind went blade sharp. "I told Ethan," Miranda said, voice lilting like she was auditioning for a commercial. "It's not personal. It's strategy. His mom is old school. She won't see it. We'll squeeze the cash flow till she gasps, then come in like angels. By the assets pennies. He'll look like a hero. Later, Mayor, easy." Her friend made a noise that sounded like a smirk. "And the mother? If she fights," Miranda said, lowering her voice until it slid through the wall like a knife, "I'll fix it. People believe what they're told if you smile while you say it. Poor Barbara, she's not well. I mean, look at her, blonde past 60. It's almost a diagnosis. We'll get her help. A facility. She'll thank us." I did not smile. I did not breathe. I rearranged the Vogue so the cover model's eyes aligned with mine. A prettier version of glaring. Nina said something about processing time. I nodded. A statue in foils, a woman carved from salt and patience. The wall became a radio. Every channel was Miranda. She bragged about their timeline, about a soft failure by Q3, about how suppliers were being nudged to tighten terms. A whisper of my ledger sprang up in my head, columns and dates. Someone had been playing with my margins like a child with matches. Then her tone changed, intimate and sing-song. "I told Ethan once we're married it'll be easier. I get the paperwork. Green card first, then the baby. Cute, right? And if things go wrong, well, it's community property, isn't it? Half is such a lovely, even number." Neighboring room, neighboring mask. The girl had angles sharp enough to open mail. I had wanted to like her. I had, I'll confess, liked her. That's the sting. Betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It arrives wearing the earrings you complimented. A phone chimed. Miranda answered on speaker. I heard Ethan's voice then, my son's, the boy who used to insist I sit front row at every science fair because, "Mom, you clap loudest." "Everything on track?" he asked. "On track," she purred. "She'll never see it." That she was me. The same she who taught him to change a tire in the rain and negotiate with truckers twice his size. Apparently I'd also taught him not to underestimate women. Then he'd promptly forgotten. They talked details. Board proxies. A loan covenant accidentally breached. A vendor pushed to rescind a discount until we cried uncle. She laughed at the phrase. They laughed together. The wall didn't muffle laughter. It magnified it. I looked at myself in the mirror, foil crown, cape, eyes like drilled ice. I thought of yoga mats and linen pants and that pamphlet on strength training for active seniors, sitting on my kitchen counter. Retirement? How adorable. I adjusted the magazine until only my mouth was visible. No tremor. Good. Miranda finished her appointment and floated out, perfume like sugared citrus. I sank lower, let the Vogue hide me. She sashayed past the row of dryers without once scanning for blonde hair under more blonde. Why would she? I'm the sort people mistake for an easy mark. That has been my favorite mistake in other people for 30 years. Nina rinsed me. Toner blowout. You're so quiet today, she said. Just plotting how to survive fall knits, I said, even amused. My voice does its best work when my heart is a drumline. I paid, tipped heavy, and walked into the late morning glare. My Mercedes winked at me, white and spotless, a chariot with heated seats. I drove home with a strange calm. The kind that arrives when fear has finally realized she's not invited. Every mile I filed something in a mental cabinet. Vendor names, Miranda's phrases, Ethan's exact cadence. By the time I turned onto my street, I had a planned skeleton and a new appreciation for walls. The phone rang as I slid the key into my front door. Ethan. The boy whose first word was truck, whose second was more. Hey, Mom. His voice wore a wool sweater of concern. Got a minute? For you, I said. I have a minute and a half. He laughed, relieved by my old line. Things are not great at the company. I didn't want to scare you, but we might be tight by year's end. Maybe worse. I'm thinking we should talk contingency, maybe a sale? There's interest. I know some folks who could take it off your hands. You'd be comfortable and you'd run for mayor? I asked, sugar soft. Silence. The kind that skids on black ice. What? No, Mom, what? Who said? I mean, he regrouped fast. He's quick, I trained him to be. Let's not overreact. It's just numbers. We'll sit down. Tonight? I looked at the clock. It was not a time for sons. It was a time for women with long memories. Tonight won't work, I said gently. But soon. I'm proud you called. Thanks, Mom, he said, sounding 8 again, then 32. Then something else I didn't recognize. Love you. Always, I said, and ended the call. I stood in my foyer with the phone warm in my palm, and the house very quiet around me. Sunlight pooled on the hardwood like champagne. I had options lined up like pearls. Fear wanted to make me small. That was adorable. I've never done small. I do precise. The old impulse fluttered. Retire, surrender the office with the corner view. Let Ethan help. Go to yoga, buy elastic waistbands, cultivate herbs in mason jars. Read about women who win because they choose not to fight. Then a different impulse roared awake. The one that built an empire out of truck schedules and stubbornness, while my ex-husband flirted his way through other people's wives and savings. Russell had always said I was too much. He meant enough. I needed counsel. Not a therapist. A general. There are 2 men whose names have a room in my head. Russell, the history lesson, and Jack, the might have been. At 20, I stood at a fork. Jack's patient eyes or Russell's fireworks. I chose fireworks. Fireworks burn out. Jack didn't. He built his own delivery service, married twice, raised 2 sons who grew up to out-argue gravity in court. We never truly drifted. We cracked jokes at industry luncheons, sent each other articles about diesel prices and innovation, went on 2 tentative dates after my divorce, sweet, careful evenings that ended with goodnight kisses and my polite retreat from the cliff's edge. I wasn't ready to trust anyone then. Maybe I was busy trusting myself. I scrolled to Jack's name. Stopped. Closed my eyes. I could hear Miranda's voice like a mosquito. She is stupid and will not understand anything. I smiled, slow and dangerous. Bless your heart, I told the empty foyer. Watch me. I pressed the call button. Barbara, Jack answered on the second ring, voice the same steady baritone that once talked me through a supplier strike at midnight. You okay? Define okay, I said lightly. Do you and your attorneys happen to be hungry for turkey this November? I've got a story, a kitchen, and a war to plan. He didn't laugh. Jack respects wars. I'll be there, he said. And Barbara, whatever it is, we'll handle it. We will, I said, and let myself believe him for precisely 3 seconds. Then the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. Russell. He smiled at the lens, handsome as a bad idea, holding a bottle of wine like a trophy he didn't earn. His eyes had that glint I recognized from past campaigns. Acquisition. I set the phone down, straightened my blouse, and opened the door with my best hostess smile. Sharp enough to cut, warm enough to lull. Barbara, he said. We need to talk about Ethan. Oh, I said, stepping aside. Do we ever? And that, my dears, is when the first piece on my chessboard moved itself. Right into my kitchen, shedding charm like breadcrumbs, not knowing the breadcrumbs led straight to the trap. Russell leaned against my kitchen counter like he'd never left, swirling his wine as if it were his birthright. Same jawline, same charm, same snake in the grass. He started talking about Ethan as though he were reading from a prepared speech. My boy, this, our legacy, that your stubbornness is holding him back. I smiled politely and let him talk, the way you let a mosquito buzz before you slap it flat. He still thought his words carried weight. They didn't. What carried weight were the numbers Miranda bragged about behind Salon walls, the panic I'd already glimpsed in Ethan's voice, and the fact that Russell had reappeared just in time to help. Funny thing about men like him. They show up whenever there's something to siphon. Barbara, he said finally, putting the glass down as if that gesture alone proved sincerity. Let Ethan lead. You've had your run. 30 years is a long time. It's time to pass the torch. Pass the torch. He might as well have said, roll over, Barbie, and let us light the fire with your life's work. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and gave him the kind of smile that should have warned him. Russell, I said, the only torch I'm passing is the one I'll use to burn down anyone who tries to rob me. The silence that followed was the kind that makes men twitch. He twitched. Good. After he left, carrying his wine bottle like a consolation prize, I sat at my desk and pulled out old files. I keep paper backups. Call me old-fashioned, but digital trails are easier to tamper with, and I've lived too long to bet my fortune on passwords alone. Ledger after ledger, I traced what Miranda had described. Subtle contract adjustments, invoices inflated by just enough to bleed cash, vendors coincidentally demanding harsher terms. My son's fingerprints were all over it, smudged with the ink of his ambition. I didn't cry. That's what some women would have done. Weep into the paperwork, whispering my own son like a prayer to a deaf god. Not me. Tears don't rebuild empires. Strategy does. I called Jack. He came by the next evening, looking older, yes, but also steadier than anyone else in my orbit. His presence was a reminder of roads not taken. Choices made when I thought passion mattered more than respect. We sat at my kitchen table, the one Russell used to pound his fist on during arguments, and Jack listened without interruption. That's his way. He doesn't fill silence with promises. He lets you load it with truth. When I finished, he said only, let me bring the boys. His sons, those sharp-eyed lawyers, arrived 2 nights later with briefcases, laptops, and the kind of energy men reserve for courtroom combat. They treated me not like some aging blonde to be pitted, but like the CEO I still was. They spread my documents across the table, eyes narrowing as they saw the sabotage spelled out in balance sheets. Deliberate, one of them said. Criminal, said the other. Music to my ears. For the first time since that wretched Salon visit, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt entertained. Let them think they could declare me senile, bankrupt me, ship me off to some fluorescent nursing home. They had no idea that every insult, every betrayal, every assumption that I was soft had only sharpened my appetite. Thanksgiving was around the corner, the holiday of gratitude, and I intended to serve a feast, with a side dish of reckoning. Ethan and Miranda thought they were writing me out of the story. What they didn't know was that I was rewriting the entire script. As Jack poured me a second glass of wine that night, he caught my eye. Barbara, he said, voice low, you're enjoying this. And I laughed, really laughed, the kind of laugh that makes people nervous. Jack, darling, I said. They thought they were burying me. They didn't realize I'm the one holding the shovel. The stage was set. They would learn soon enough. And the first move? Oh, I'd already chosen it. I love Thanksgiving. There, confession out in the open. Not the sentimentality so much as the choreography. Timing the turkey so the skin snaps like an applause, arranging the potatoes into a cloud, watching people relax into the magic of food and family. This year, the choreography had an extra beat. This year, the turkey would be a prop in a play I wrote, produced, and directed. Ethan and Miranda were indeed at a resort, somewhere with palm trees and a spa package that smelled of coconut and ill-gotten confidence. I'd toasted their honeymoon in advance in my head, a dozen times while I invited the only people I trusted to help me pull off what I kept calling, with a wink, Operation Thanksgiving Surprise. Jack's boys, Sam and Peter, accepted without batting an eyelash. Lawyers love holidays almost as much as they love subpoenas. Jack himself arrived with his usual quiet grin, looking like someone who'd been designed specifically to be a reliable backbone in the wrong century. I'd told the staff to set the table with extra care. My grandmother's silver, the crystal glasses that make guests speak carefully, linen napkins folded into tiny tents. I roasted that turkey to golden humiliation. The house smelled like victory and butter. Nina from the Salon supplied lemon bars, unlabeled, because some desserts should be anonymous. I wanted my home to look and feel utterly ordinary. Ordinary lowers defenses. Ordinary allows the most extraordinary things to happen under its roof. We started with soup, pumpkin of course, and light conversation. Jack and I traded old stories, the ones that expose tenderness without revealing vulnerability. The supplier who once lost a shipment because he'd taken a wrong turn at Albuquerque. The trucker who read the Bible backward on long hauls. Sam and Peter stayed businesslike, eyes bright as courthouse lamps. They spread my financials on the dining table between place settings, red string between documents like a detective's board. I pretended to be fussing with the gravy until the right moment, the one I'd practiced in my head like a singer runs a scale. They had found a rhythm. They had found a pattern. Small siphons. A vendor reclassification that pulled cash into a shell account. A consulting firm, Astor Logistics, that had billed for efficiency audits when no audits occurred. Astor's little signature stamp matched a dozen strange memos. Sam tapped a printed email. This one, he said, was sent by an address that mirrors Ethan's corporate alias. Ethan under at Astor Logistics. Calm. My throat tightened for a breath and then relaxed. Ethan's not stupid, I said. He's the kind of man who learns risk in stages. Flirtation, jackpot, escalation. Peter spread another sheet across a chair. There are 3 beneficiaries listed for the Astor payments. 2 are shell companies registered at the same mail forwarding service downtown. The third. He paused for the drama only lawyers can afford. Lists APO box in West Palm. We pulled the USPS logs. Payments go there, then transfer through a chain of accounts. Our IT team traced the first transfer back to an account that's been flagged for suspicious activity. And the odd part? The contact person lists a middle-aged man with Russell's initials. The silver platter of roasted potatoes clattered against my ribs at the news. Not literally, just metaphorically, but I felt the table tilt. Russell. Of course Russell would find a way to be near money again. He had the appetite of someone who mistook other people's fortunes for free samples. He'd always been a man who could smile and conspire in the same breath. Are you saying he's involved? I asked, keeping my voice as bland as cranberry sauce. I'm saying your list of suspects should now include people you already know how to read, Sam said. We can freeze accounts, temporary restraining order, emergency notice to banks. But that's public. That alerts them. It might cause a run. It might spook vendors to accelerate whatever scheme they're running. Or it might flush them out. Flush them out, Jack said, and his voice was gentle as a lever. Make them act so hastily they leave a trail. A plan began to snap into place like a well-designed hinge. Lawsuits were necessary, but lawsuits are long and noisy. I wanted something crisp and immediate, to make their greedy fingers twitch so they'd show themselves. We decided on an approach that pleased both the lawyerly boys and my theatrical sensibilities. Call it strategic provocation. We would publish a carefully worded expression of interest in selling the company. Nothing binding. A press release crafted to read like the contemplation of an aging CEO considering retirement. It would mention exploratory conversations and inquiry from regional investors. And the rumor mill would do the rest. Greed hates to wait. Greed lurches. Jack choked on his soup, laughing that laugh of his. "You're enjoying this," he murmured, and maybe I was. There's a giddy clarity when you're about to take back what's yours. We worked through the menu and the plan between mouthfuls. While Sam called a friend in corporate compliance to quietly flag transactions, Peter lined up a conservative litigator who could fillet a fraudulent invoice across state lines. Jack and his boys offered my staff guidance. Don't speak to vendors about anything but schedules. Send all inquiries to legal counsel. Reroute certain payments into a monitored escrow account. I changed passwords like women change lipstick colors. Sudden, dramatic, unapologetic. Between carving the turkey and ladling cranberry, I found myself watching the door as if it might open and reveal Miranda sunburned and laughing, returning early from a surprise massage. I was not naive. They might not even be in the country when I lit this fire. But fires spread regardless of proximity. If they couldn't be burned, their co-conspirators would be. The goal was not to corner a single fox. It was to set a snare so wide it caught every animal that ran on its tracks. At some point after pie and cardamom coffee, we moved into the study. The legal boys had spreadsheets that looked like battle maps. I poured another glass of wine and sat back, letting the men do their small justice. They worked with that merciless kindness lawyers have, meticulous, efficient, a little hungry for the adrenaline of a writing. Just before they left, as late afternoon bled into that dramatic blue that makes stolen things look plausible, Sam closed his laptop and handed me a USB stick. "For safekeeping," he said. "Encrypted. Copies of everything we pulled. If anything happens tonight, if wires move, if someone tries to alter records, call me immediately. We'll file. We'll freeze. We'll do whatever it takes." I folded the stick into my palm like a charm. Don't make me go to jail for enjoying a perfectly executed comeback. I joked, but even my joke sounded like a promise. They drove off into the November dusk. Jack lingered in the doorway and looked at me the way only a man who'd loved you at 20 and stayed at friend level for 40 could look. "Barbara," he said softly, "be careful." "I plan to," I answered, and I meant it. I locked the back door after them and went to the window to watch their taillights disappear. For the first time in weeks, I felt the warm glow of momentum. The house hummed with it, the leftover scent of lemon bars, the warmth of a turkey's memory. The legal papers still spread like a battlefield map on my dining room table. Then the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity is a dangerous but necessary vice. I answered. "Mrs. Donovan?" a clipped voice asked. "We have a package for you. It was delivered to the wrong address, but our driver says it's yours. Can you confirm?" "Of course," I said. My voice was steady, but something in the back of my neck felt like feathers. "Come by. I'm home." The knock came 10 minutes later. A courier in a plain jacket handed me an envelope and a small, glossy photograph. No return address. Just my name in neat block letters, as if someone had practiced the moment of giving me bad news and wanted it to be pretty. I glanced at the photograph and the color drained from my cheeks like someone had turned off the sun. It was Russell, smiling with Ethan, arm around his shoulders on a dock in a marina. A receipt tucked into the corner of the photo bore a date. Not from this summer. Not from last month. 2 days ago. My knees almost failed me. I held the photograph like evidence that needed careful cataloging. Then, because I couldn't help myself, I checked the envelope. Inside, a single line typed on a card. "We do what we must. R." I should have expected him. But I hadn't expected the arrogance of the signature. The phone blinked with a text. From Ethan. "Mom. Call me. It's urgent." I looked at the photograph, then at my kitchen table, where my grandfather's clock ticked as if reminding me that time was still on my side, for the moment. The oven retained the warmth of the day, and my heart beat with a slow, dangerous rhythm. I touched the screen and called him back. He answered on the second ring. "Mom," he said, and his voice sounded like someone stepping off a cliff on a dare. "We have a problem." "Tell me something I don't already know," I said. There was a crackle of static, then an odd sound like someone in the background laughing softly, approvingly, the kind of laugh that made my blood run thin. Ethan swallowed and said, "Dad met with Russell yesterday. They think they can make this happen faster." "I don't." "Faster?" I echoed, tasting the word like copper. Who said anything about fast? This is a carefully choreographed disaster you've been helping to build. Silence on the line. Then Ethan said, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't think it would. Save the apologies, I said. Just tell me exactly what was said. He inhaled. There'll be a move next month. They want to push a vote. They want to call a creditors' meeting. They've already begun whispering to a couple of regional investors. They think if they get momentum, the board will have to accept a deal. Then we must make their momentum into panic, I said. My voice had the coolness of someone who'd been through winter and come home with firewood. Prepare to act. Freeze accounts. Publish the exploratory release in a controlled manner. And Ethan, who did you tell? Who else knows? He hesitated. Just Miranda and Russell. And a man named Carlos from Astor. I closed my eyes. Carlos. Astor. Russell. Ethan. A neat little constellation of betrayal. Don't talk to anyone else, I said. And listen to me, pack a bag, Ethan. Go to Miami. Stay out of sight until I tell you otherwise. Don't speak to Russell. Don't meet with him. If they try to force your hand, stall. Bluff. Remember what I taught you about dealing with suppliers, always ask for terms in writing. It's a detail men forget when they think they've already won. He protested weakly. Mom, this is my life too. So is mine, I said. And we will not let you take mine from me. The line went quiet and then he whispered, Okay, I'll do it. He hung up. I stared at the photograph again, then at Russell's card. The laugh I'd heard earlier, soft, smug, echoed in my memory like an unwanted guest. I put the photo in a drawer with the USB Sam had given me and closed it slowly like sealing a casket, not for a person but for an era. The house felt smaller, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. Outside, a light snow began to fall, quiet and indifferent. I wrapped my hands around a cup of coffee and kept thinking of the doc photograph. Russell smiling like he'd found the map to buried treasure. He'd forgotten one thing. They'd chosen the wrong mother to cross. There would be a vote. There would be meetings. There would be lawyers, bank transfers, whispered phone calls at night. And somewhere between the courtrooms and the islands, between palm trees and pine trees, someone would make a move that could not be undone. I walked to the foyer and turned the lock. Then I took out a small leather-bound book, my list of people you call in an emergency, and added one new name in careful script. Jack, it said, then below it, prepare to propose properly. Outside, the snow fell. Inside, a war was warming up like a kettle, and I, Barbara Donovan, planned to be the one to whistle the tune. By morning I had a plan. Nothing dramatic yet. No boardroom fireworks or lawyerly subpoenas. First moves must look like hesitation. You let the opponent believe you're dazed, that you're too slow to notice your pawns being swept away. They relax. They slip. And then you strike. I called Jack at 9 sharp. He answered with a chuckle. You never call me before coffee. Consider this your wake-up call, I said. Bring your sons. We're going to stage an accident. He didn't miss a beat. Financial accident? Of course, I replied. The only kind I've got time for these days. By noon, my dining room looked like a command center. Sam and Peter spread out papers, Jack poured coffee, and I paced like a general with good hair. I told them my idea. We'd leak just enough information to make Russell and Miranda believe the company was already circling the drain. A press release, vague but strategic. A whisper to a local journalist I'd known for 20 years. The kind who could make a puff piece feel like gospel. The bait, Sam said. The hook, Peter added. And the reel? Jack asked. Me, I said, grinning. I'll play the tired, confused blonde. Everyone's favorite archetype. They'll think I'm finally giving up. They'll come running with their rescue plan. And when they do, we'll already have the paperwork to prove conspiracy, Sam finished. Exactly. We worked until the sun dropped. Every detail plotted like choreography. Then Jack lingered after his sons packed up. He watched me clear cups, his eyes softer than I wanted them to be. You're enjoying this, he said, same as before. Of course I am, I answered. Do you think I ran trucks across 4 states for 30 years just to knit scarves in retirement? I like the fight. It keeps my lipstick bright. He laughed, but there was concern beneath it. Barbara, Russell isn't just greedy. He's desperate. That makes him dangerous. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. So am I. That night after Jack left, I finally checked my emails. And there it was, a message forwarded from a supplier I'd known since my first warehouse days. Subject line, urgent. The body contained a copy of a message supposedly from me, authorizing a transfer of goods to Astor Logistics. Except the signature wasn't mine. It was forged. Poorly, but enough to fool someone who didn't know the curl of my bee. I felt my stomach tighten, not from fear but from fury. Someone was using my name. Someone thought they could wear my signature like a Halloween mask. I drafted a reply to my supplier, short, sweet, unshakable. Thank you for catching this. Do not proceed. All communications from me will now be verified by phone as well. Barbara. Then I sat back, poured myself a glass of wine, and smiled at the absurdity of it all. My ex-husband, my son, and his scheming fiancé were playing checkers on a board I built. And I was playing chess with my own rules. The phone rang at 10. A blocked number. I answered. A man's voice, unfamiliar, low. Mrs. Donovan. Best if you stop digging. Retire quietly. Spend your golden years on beaches, not in courtrooms. I swirled my wine, let the silence stretch. And if I don't? A pause then. Then someone might start questioning your stability. People might say you're confused. Dangerous even. Miranda's fingerprints all over that little script. I could practically hear her sugary giggle in the background. I laughed, hard enough that the man hesitated. Darling, I said. If you're going to threaten a woman like me, do your homework. I've been called worse by better. Sleep well. And I hung up. I went to bed smiling that night, not because I wasn't afraid, but because fear had finally remembered who it was dealing with. The next morning, the article appeared online. Regional logistics giant considering sale amid family transition plans. Harmless to most eyes. But to Russell, Miranda, and their little crew, it would read like blood in the water. And I waited, coffee in hand, for the sharks to circle. They didn't wait long. By Tuesday morning, the phones in my office were lit up like Christmas trees. Vendors wanting reassurance. Reporters fishing for a quote. My assistant, poor girl, kept sticking her head in the door whispering, "Another call, Barbara." I waved her off each time. Let them stew. But Russell? He doesn't stew. He storms. By noon he was in my lobby, all swagger and aftershave, with Ethan at his side looking pale and jittery. And behind them Miranda, dolled up in a blazer 2 sizes too tight, acting like she was auditioning for a role called Serious Businesswoman Number 3. "Mom," Ethan started, his voice shaking like a wet leaf. "We need to talk. Now." I let them into the boardroom. Long oak table, my kingdom's throne room. I sat at the head, deliberately calm, sipping tea from my porcelain mug that read Queen of Everything. Russell launched first. "Barbara, what the hell is this article? Sale? Transition? Do you know what kind of panic you've just caused?" "Yes," I said evenly. "I do." Miranda perched in a chair like a cat that had found a sunbeam. "You should have consulted us. Ethan's been preparing a plan. We have interested buyers, real investors. You're sabotaging his future." "Funny," I said, tilting my head. "That's exactly what I overheard you two discussing at the salon. Sabotage. Except it wasn't his future you were protecting. It was your pockets." Ethan flinched. Miranda froze for a beat too long, then recovered with a bright laugh. "You must have misheard." "Darling," I said. "I don't mishear when the subject is me. I heard every word. Every filthy little plan about bankrupting this company, buying it for pennies, and tucking me away in a nursing home." The silence in that room was thick enough to spread on toast. Ethan stared at the floor. Russell smirked like the devil caught mid-card trick. And Miranda? She dropped the smile for the briefest second, revealing the shark beneath. Russell tried to regain control. "Barbara, don't dramatize. The company's in trouble. Ethan's offering solutions. Investors can help us. You can finally retire." I leaned forward, both hands on the table. "If you think I'll let you and your imported Jezebel bleed me dry, you've underestimated me." Again. Miranda bristled. "Imported Jezebel? Don't play coy. You didn't fall in love with Ethan. You fell in love with a green card." And if you think I won't drag every one of your little admissions into court, you don't know me. Russell cut in sharply. Careful, Barbara. You don't want people thinking you're unstable. A woman your age running a business this size? Mistakes happen. Maybe that's why. I slammed my mug on the table so hard tea sloshed over the rim. Don't you dare. My voice carried the weight of 30 years of sleepless nights, truck schedules, payroll crises, and fights with banks that would have folded lesser women. I built this. I kept it alive while you were chasing skirts and leaving IOUs in every bar from here to Miami. You don't get to rewrite history in my boardroom. Ethan looked up at me then, eyes wide, torn between shame and loyalty. But before he could speak, Miranda pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Fine. If you want to play hardball, here's reality. Debt schedules. Supplier complaints. We've gathered evidence. This company is circling the drain whether you admit it or not. Step aside, Barbara, before you go down with it. I didn't even touch the folder. I just smiled. Cute. You've been busy. Because what Miranda didn't know was that Jack's sons had already built a much thicker folder. Every forgery, every siphoned dollar, every fake invoice was documented, time-stamped, ready to be filed in court. They thought they were handing me a loaded gun. What they didn't realize was that I already had a cannon aimed at their backs. I stood smoothing my jacket. Meeting's over. You three can scurry back to whatever rat hole you crawled out of. And tell your investors this. Barbara Donovan doesn't retire. She reinvents. And when she's done, there won't be room in this industry for parasites like you. I walked out, heels sharp on the marble floor, leaving them speechless in my wake. That night Sam called. We intercepted new transfers. Astor's moving faster. Russell's name popped up on a signed guarantor doc. They're overplaying their hand. Good, I said. Let them. Because what they didn't know, and what I was about to show them, is that I planted a surprise in that exploratory press release. A little signal to one of my oldest allies, a rival logistics firm who owed me a favor so big, he practically bowed every time we passed at conferences. He called earlier, voice gleeful. Barbara, are you really thinking of selling? Because if you are, I want first bite. I told him, hold that appetite. I might just feed you something juicier. And I meant it. The sharks were circling, but what they couldn't see was the net tightening around them. Every knot tied with precision. I went to bed that night with a smile so sharp it could have cut glass. Tomorrow the real fun would begin. They say the first real test of a plan is whether your enemies will make your mistakes for you. Lucky for me, mine were eager students. I started the morning with a small, delicious lie that tasted like coffee and revenge. A call to my old rival, Thomas Hale. Thomas runs Hale Freight, the sort of company that buys whole fleets at a glance and then wakes up the market by dropping prices like a gauntlet. He owes me favors the size of small countries because once, when his trucks got stuck in a blizzard, I lent him drivers and diesel and saved his contract. You don't forget that. I didn't have to persuade him. I only had to let him imagine the scent of a takeover and he was sold. Barbara, he said, velvet and eager. If you're really thinking of selling. Thomas, I purred. I'm thinking out loud. I want to hear who would bite. I'll tell you this. No hostile bidders. I want someone with dignity. Someone who'll keep the trucks running and the old hands paid. He breathed like a man taking a sip of champagne. If there's interest, call me first. I hung up and smiled. That call would do the work of a dozen subpoenas. A rumor whispered into the right ear is a hunting horn to men with capital. Thomas would test the market, and while he did, Russell and Miranda would reveal themselves trying to jockey for position. Predators cannot resist an exposed carcass. Next I made the more necessary calls, the banks, the largest vendors. I told them there had been a suspicious email authorizing transfers, and that all outgoing payments for the next 7 days must be routed to a monitored escrow account. Calm, procedural. No panic. Just the kind of instruction a woman whose hands had once stamped payrolls would give. By mid-afternoon the chessboard shifted. Sam called me first. They bit, he said. Russell forwarded a term sheet to an investor. It's not finalized, but it looks like a leverage play. They plan to push for an emergency creditors meeting next week. Ethan's name is on some documents, and get this, Miranda's listed as an operational consultant. Good. They were moving too fast. Greed fuels haste. Haste fuels mistakes. I texted Ethan, come by. Noon. No phones. And bring nothing you care about losing. He arrived sweating like a man carrying bad weather. His face had that fresh ash look. Shame burned into confusion. When I told him what I'd heard, he blinked, then admitted what I already suspected. His father had shown him a draft plan. Dad thinks if he helps, he gets a position on the new board and a cut, Ethan said, jaw tight. He says it's not personal. He says the company needs fresh blood. Fresh blood often smells like mercury, I told him. He flinched. Ethan, choosing between your father and me is not a game. But choose you must. If you walk into that creditors' meeting and vote for a coup, you will not have my company. You will have their version of it, hollow and sold. That's not fair, he said. His voice crumpled into something very small. He didn't finish. He's always been a man of gestures, not grit. Life's not fair, dear. It's tactical, I said. You can help fix things honestly, or you can help ruin them and climb on the bones. Which are you? I waited. He had to look at me like a boy deciding whether to steal a cookie. You're asking me to betray Dad, he whispered. No, I answered. I'm asking you to choose not to betray yourself. He left without choosing out loud. Later that night he texted. I need time. I'm meeting Dad tomorrow. That was the moment I hardened my spine. Time, I decided, would be a tool I'd use to sharpen them. The next move was theatrical in the way I prefer. Small, precise theater. I leaked, very gently and through channels so delicate they would sound like a rumor at a yacht club, that an investor had reached out to discuss a buyout, but only if the company showed instability as a bargaining tactic. A quiet prod. Then I watched. Russell didn't need much prodding. He began to gray the edges of his plans, moving to accelerate the creditors' meeting, trying to create a crisis that he could solve. Miranda, flush with the idea of being indispensable, started calling board members and vendors like a campaign manager on speed. The more they moved, the more footprints they left. That's when Jack stepped up in a way that made my chest warm with an odd, stubborn pride. He called a favor from an old client on the federal regulatory side. We need a soft audit, he said to his contact. Not for punishment but for clarity. They agreed to look at our procurement pathways, discreetly and with the authority to prod banks when necessary. Not a raid. A pinprick with teeth. On the legal front, Sam and Peter filed an emergency motion to freeze accounts tied to Astor Logistics and related shells. Peter worked the judges he knew with the quiet charm that comes from being effective and ethically frightening. Sam coordinated with an IT forensic team to trace the original forged emails. They found them. The IP address matched servers that had been accessed by an account registered to Russell 2 weeks earlier, through a coffee shop Wi-Fi in a town where Russell's shell company had no reason to exist. When I saw that evidence laid out, I felt an unfamiliar sensation, part triumph, part pity. For Russell, there are few things sadder than being outmaneuvered by the woman he once believed he could outlive and outspend. For Miranda, there was a kind of wrath in the idea that the immigrant bride who plotted to secure a green card might find herself with nothing but a ticket out of the country. But the world doesn't move only by evidence. It moves by perception. So we created a perception. I held a press luncheon 2 days after the evidence surfaced. I stood at a podium with Jack beside me and Sam's printed affidavits on the table like a promise. Cameras flashed. I spoke plainly about attempted manipulation, forged authorizations, and the company's commitment to transparency. I hinted, deliberately, that we were cooperating with federal inquiries. The press drank it like water in a desert. In the meantime, I left a trail for Russell to follow. I made sure a copy of the forged email, the one that pretended to be mine, found its way into his mailbox. I knew he'd panic, and panic breeds action, desperate, sloppy action. He called Ethan that evening and you could hear the tremor. I can fix this. We'll push the meeting sooner. We'll force a vote. Ethan's voice over the line sounds small. I don't know, Dad. He didn't know. He is my son, clever in spreadsheets and weak in conscience. He had always been the one who loved diplomacy more than battle. But now diplomacy meant nothing. At midnight, a new variable entered the field. A lawyer from Russell's camp called me. Formal, cool. Mrs. Donovan, she said. We have reason to believe you've been tampering with documents. It would be in your best interest to withdraw your public statements while we sort this. It was predictable. They were trying to flip the script, accuse the target of the theft of truth. Old trick. Dirty trick. I smiled, though the woman on the line couldn't see it. By all means, I said. Let the courts decide. I welcome the scrutiny. And then I hung up and called Russell. You'll regret this, he said when he picked up. You already have, I said. But it's not too late to stop digging the hole you're in. Watch your back, he replied. The arrogance in his voice was brittle. I always do, I said. And Russell? Say hello to Miranda. Tell her I hope she enjoys the view from whatever embankment she's chosen. He hung up. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment of vanity. This whole thing, messy and human and combustible, was proving how alive I still was. At dawn I found a message on my answering machine. Not a text, not a call, but an old-fashioned tape recording left by Russell. He'd always liked the nostalgia of voice, thinking it more intimate, more threatening. He told me, in a voice syrupy and dangerous, that if I didn't step aside, he would expose questions about my mental fitness to run a company. He had already whispered to a few board members, he said, who were concerned. He'd line them up. I sat in the kitchen with the machine whirring like an angry insect, and then I did something I rarely do. I laughed. It rose from my belly, clear and unbent. Fine, I told the empty room. Then let them expose me. Let them file. Let them whisper. This is a woman who signed payroll checks, drove trucks into storms, calmed furious vendors at 2 a.m. I have nothing to prove to cowards. I played the tape to Jack that morning. He listened, and afterward he took both my hands in his and said softly, If he tries to put you in a home, I will shatter his reputation into pieces. There's a sweetness to being vowed protection by the one who has loved you in an unadorned way for decades. It steadied me. But one truth remained stubborn. This fight would not end with bank freezes and subpoenas. It would end when someone somewhere broke, fled, or went to prison. And the person most at risk of breaking wasn't necessarily Russell or Miranda. It was my son. When Ethan walked into my office later that afternoon, his eyes were hollow in a way that made me want to cradle him like a hurt animal. He'd made his choice. He had sided with his father in a move that, on the surface, promised him power. How could he? I asked myself, but then I told him instead, plainly. You chose Ethan. You chose a board seat over your mother's trust. You chose your ambition over loyalty. He sank into the chair and, for once, the boy I'd raised gave himself to consequence. I thought I was helping, he whispered. I thought I was securing a future that included you. You can still secure a future that includes me, I answered. Come clean. Come to the creditors' meeting and tell the truth. Or walk away and I will never trust a single thing you say again. His hands curled into fists. If I come clean, I ruin Dad. He looked at me like a son hovering between two graves. You will save yourself, I said. And possibly your soul. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he looked up, and in his eyes was a decision that made my heart drop and my blood race. I'll be at the meeting. Relief and dread wove themselves together like a fabric I could wear as armor. He was coming. That meant he could betray us or be our witness. Either way, the stakes were suddenly painfully real. I reached for my phone and dialed Sam. Call the courthouse, I said. Book every available hearing room. We're going to make sure nothing moves without witnesses. As the line clicked, I heard the back door open. The photograph Russell had sent, Ethan and Russell dockside, had been a warning. But warnings are invitations to acts. I moved to intercept whoever came through that door. The hallway smelled faintly of snowmelt and suicide notes. When I opened the study, someone had left a bouquet of white lilies on my desk. No card. Only a single pistol, clean and clinical, on top of the stack of documents. For a breath, the house went utterly still. Then the phone rang. Ethan calling from an unknown number. The caller ID blinked, and the voice on the other end wasn't his. Consider this your final offer, Mrs. Donovan, a cold voice said, and the line clicked dead. I looked at the pistol, the lilies, the documents, and felt the room tilt. Not with fear, but with the focused clarity of a woman who has been pushed to decide how far she will go. Outside, snow fell like quiet applause. Inside, the war machine purred. And I, who had once built this company from nothing but grit and maps and the faith of drivers, understood finally that the next move would be the hardest of all. It would require me to choose between love and ruin, between letting a son live and letting a lie die. I wrapped my hands around the pistol, not to fire, mind you, but to feel the weight of consequence. And in that weight I found the decision that would change everything. I set the pistol down in a locked drawer. Then I called my ex-husband, not for reconciliation, for information. I called Russell because sometimes you have to speak to your enemy to hear what your friends are hiding. There was a simplicity to it, a brutal utility. I did not call him for comfort, or for reconciliation, or to let him plead like a soap opera villain. I called because men like him find it hard to keep their pride from their tongues. They talk when they should lie still. And talk he did. He picked up on the second ring, breath warm with someone else's cologne. Barbie, he said. An old nickname that once had a sugar in it and now sounded like a challenge. To what do I owe the pleasure? To tell me the truth, I said. Start with the doc's photo. There was a pause long enough to hang a coat on. You've got nerve, he said, then the laugh, the one that used to make me soft and now made me alert. You always did. You should have known better than to bury a man and expect him never to dig again. Russell, I said, did you meet Ethan on that dock? Yes, he admitted. And Carlos. And a man from Astor. They like the marina for private conversations. Salt and secrecy. It smells expensive. He said it fondly, like a man remembering a good cigar. Why? I asked, steady as a metronome. What were you promising? He hummed like a man arranging music. A structure, he said finally. A way to pressure the board. A way to make the company look shaky and then offer rescue funding. Classic leverage play. You taught me leverage once when you backed my first foolish venture, so I know how tempting it smells. You helped them, I said. It was not a question. My voice did not shake. If anything, it grew colder, winter glass. He shrugged. I helped Ethan see an option. Family business can get stale. Sometimes a fresh hand is good. And there's compensation, Barbara. Business is business. Compensation. The word slithered across the phone line and wrapped itself around my ribs like ice. I felt the floor tilt, but only for half a second. Then something else took over. Not panic, not grief, not shock, but the keen, ridiculous clarity of a woman who'd built a company by turning problems into profit. You want him to be mayor, I said. You think your son's vanity and Miranda's citizenship gambit fold into your plan for comfortable retirement. You fed your ego a new toy and called it progress. I let the anger do its neat work, then set it aside. Angry is useful when it sharpens the plan. Angry is not useful if it blinds you. You sound dramatic, he said. And you always did. Russell, I said. Who's funding the initial movement? Who's giving Astor the cash to push the vendor holds? Who's Carlos working for besides that shell in West Palm? He chuckled, suddenly proud. You always did dislike the smell of money that doesn't wear a name. There are investors, Barb. A couple of hedge groups who thought you might be a soft exit. A man named Alvarez is putting some quiet equity behind the plan. He likes turnaround plays. Alvarez. Of course. The name colligated with a rumor I'd heard once at a freight conference, the sort of rumor that smells like gunpowder and lobster dinners. Alvarez liked chaos because he could buy in low and sell the bones high. You know this is treachery, I said. You know Ethan's name is being used. Russell had the gall to sound sympathetic. Your boy is susceptible to flattery. He's always wanted to matter in a way that isn't just filial. I didn't force him. He signed things. He liked the attention. He's my son, I said. The words surprised me with their softness. Russell didn't need soft. He needed a mirror. Russell, you're the one who taught him the taste of being needed by men who think they own the world. There was a silence after that, one that tasted like old wine. What are you going to do? He asked at last. I told him. Not everything, never everything, but enough. Enough to let the sound of my confidence rattle him. I told him I'd gone to Jack. I told him Sam and Peter had the papers lined up. I told him about the soft audit that Jack had nudged into motion. I told him I'd notified banks and vendors, and that I planned to move with a combination of legal teeth and public pressure so sharp it would make Alvarez rethink his appetite. You're making threats, Russell said, offended like a man who had always thought himself a gentleman despite his hands in so many pies. No, I said. Fact-based statements. And if you're helping my son, you're going to have to answer for it. Russell's laugh this time was brittle. Answer to whom? You? To the truth, I said. And to the law. You're being dramatic, he said again and ended the call. I hung up the phone and looked at the pistol in the drawer like a small, stupid thing and then at my hands, the hands that had filed payroll, balanced ledgers, picked the company up after a trucker strike and soothed men whose stomachs were as empty as their promises. My life had been proof that you could build a thing from nothing and keep it alive. Russell had proof that you could charm your way into a seat at someone else's table and use a son as a ladder. Call Jack next. He answered without an intervening laugh. What did you learn? He asked. Russell's in it deeper than I thought. I told him. Alvarez is funding. Carlos is a proxy. They're planning to lean on vendors this week. Ethan is stuck. Jack's quiet was the kind that breeds action. We'll tighten the loop. I'll see to federal channels. I'll make sure the soft audit becomes an official inquiry if there's any funny business. And Barb? He paused. Keep Ethan close. I thought of the boy who'd once placed a toy truck on my knee and declared it the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The boy who'd learned to fix engines because I showed him how. Now he was a man with a briefcase and a half-measured conscience. I wanted to take him in my arms, but I also needed him to stand up and be counted. How much of him is still in there? I asked Jack, not entirely rhetorically. You'll see, he said. If he comes to the meeting, he either helps you or he buries himself. The week tightened like a fist. Vendors called. One of our longest-standing partners emailed with worry, asking for verification and expressing concern about sudden changes in remittance instructions. I forwarded that to Sam. He grinned like a man who'd found marshmallows in his trench coat. They smell fear, he said. We feed them more. On Wednesday an envelope arrived. No return address, heavy with paper and the kind of earnest threats that men send when they want you to feel small. Inside was a notarized statement from a board member, regular, respectable, expressing concern about Barbara Donovan's decision-making, and requesting that, for the stability of the company, the board appoint an independent assessment committee. It was a classic move. The seeds of doubt seeded by someone with a pen and a motive. I read it twice, then 3 times. It was signed by a name I recognized. A man who owed me money from a long-ago deal I had forgiven because he'd promised loyalty. Loyalty, it turns out, has a price that changes with the wind. I took a breath and placed the letter into a scanner. Then I took a picture of it and sent it to the small, curated group I trusted. Jack, Sam, Peter, and Thomas Hale. Attached. A note that said only adjust your appetite. He's fishing in a pond I stocked. Thomas texted back within minutes. Bring him to me. I'll bite his hook and pay for dinner. Jack's response was a simple, steady stand by. That evening I brewed coffee and sat on the back stoop while snow drifted sideways like soft applause. The house felt uneasily maternal, the way a mother who knows there will be a scrape in the night waits for the children to crawl back to bed. I felt the old edges of grief for choices I'd made. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd married, the years wasted on proofs that some people never change. But grief was a luxury I could afford later. Right now there were hands to play and pieces to move. Ethan called as the sun set, voice quieter than it had been over the phone. Mom, he said. Dad said he has a deal with Alvarez. He says it's our last chance. He said he's sorry. He wants me to sign papers. He says he doesn't want to hurt you, but what did you tell him? I asked. I said I needed more time, he whispered. I said I'd think about it. I could hear the strain in the sentence, the kind that's like a hinge creaking under weight. Promise me something, I said. If this meeting happens and they push their plan, you come to me before you sign. You promise me that, Ethan. I promise, he said. I don't want to lose you. The line went dead and I sat very still, feeling the gravity of the promise like a necklace placed gently around my neck. It felt heavy and precious. Then the doorbell rang. On the porch, in a manila envelope, was a flyer from Alvarez's fund. Glossy, professionally printed. Invest in growth. Invest with Alvarez. Under it, scrawled in a handwriting I knew. You will lose everything if you fight this, Barbie. The arrogance of signing a threat with a name like that made me laugh outright. I tucked the flyer into my pocket and without thinking called Russell back. The phone rang. He answered. "You called me." "I did," I said. "You've chosen a rich man's company to stand with you." I chose the only people who matter in logistics. Drivers who know when a route is clean, vendors who read invoices like prayers, and men who keep their word because their name stands for something. You'll find out the difference soon. "Oh, Barbara," he said, annoyed. "You still think you can charm your way out?" "I don't charm," I said. "I do my work. And I will make sure anyone who broke the law finds the right kind of attention." The line clicked dead. I stood in the kitchen then and looked at the photograph of Ethan and Russell on the dock, tucked in my drawer. The boy in that photo was smiling, unaware of the ledger lines fate had drawn around him. The man he might become was a question I intended to answer for myself. When I locked the drawer, I added one more name to my private list. Make Ethan into the son I can be proud of, or learn to let go. It was not a threat. It was a mission. Outside, the snow fell like paper confetti. Inside, plans thickened. The meeting loomed like a cliff we all had to stand on. And I, who had never loved retreat, prepared to leap forward. Tomorrow I'd go to court. Tomorrow I'd call Alvarez's people and offer them something they could not refuse: exposure. Tomorrow I would make them choose between profit and prosecution. But tonight I washed the dishes slowly, letting the warm water steady my hands, the way a surgeon steadies before an incision. The battle was not only about dollars. It was about the kind of woman I intended to be when the smoke cleared. Fierce. Implacable. Not alone. And perhaps by then finally loved by the right man. Courtrooms have a smell. A sterile mix of lemon polish, old paper, and the faint metallic tang of adrenaline. I walked into that one like a woman who owns half the potholes on the county road. Steady, practiced, not the least bit surprised to be noticed. Cameras angled toward me as if I were an exhibit, and I gave the photographers exactly what they wanted. The measured smile of someone who knows how to wear scandal like an accessory. Jack sat 2 rows back, hands folded, his presence a kind of gentle armor. Sam and Peter had already installed themselves at the plaintiff's table like surgeons about to operate. Their folders were thick enough to be sleds. Thomas Hale had sent a short, gracious note that made it into the press packet. Integrity matters in business. I support transparency. He didn't have to be there to be a problem for Alvarez. The judge called the hearing to order with a gavel that sounded like a grandfather clock announcing doom. Our motion was simple. Temporary injunction on any asset transfers, immediate forensic review of the alleged fraudulent invoices, and a suppression of any vote pending outcome. We presented the forged email, the trail of transfers, the vendor letters, the Astorshell document, and the IP logs that traced back, embarrassingly, to a coffee shop session. Russell thought clever. Evidence has a way of being cruelly precise. When Sam spoke, he did the thing I admired most about him. He made the facts feel like truth. He walked the judge through the arc of deception: small vendor adjustments that looked like bookkeeping errors, a shell company receiving payments that then funneled into a West Palm P.O. box, a paper trail that stained like ink on cloth. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. He let the numbers do the hauling. Then Peter called Ethan to the stand. I watched my son walk up like a man stepping into his father's shadow. He sat, fidgeted, then gazed at me as if searching for permission. There was a tremor in his voice at first. He stammered through admissions that would have sunk any lesser man. Unsigned memos passed, a meeting with Russell and Alvarez that smelled of promises, Mina Miranda, being presented as an operational consultant. His confession was clumsy and raw. He did not spin. He did not hide behind bluster. He said what he had done and why. The flattering nods, the sense that he could finally matter beyond being my son. He said it, and his eyes filled with a kind of adult despair I had loved and hardened in equal measure. The jury of public opinion was already leaning. The judge listened, brows drawn like curtains. When Ethan finished, he sat down and looked at me. His look was not the boy's look anymore. It was a man's look that had met consequence and found it heavy. What happened next I will not pretend was graceful. Russell's attorney tried to argue coercion. These things happen in family businesses. Tempers flare, interpretations vary. The defense tried to paint my public statements as hysteria. But paperwork is like a tattoo. It does not wash away with good intentions. Then someone from the prosecution stood and said simply, "We have a subpoena for Mr. Alvarez. We also have an inquiry for Mr. Russell Donovan regarding digital forgeries." There was a sound in the courtroom like someone dropping silverware. Russell's color went from practice tan to paper white. He looked at Ethan, desperation peeling his expression raw. Ethan's mouth moved, but his voice was small. He had no speech left to hand his father. I did not gloat. I am not unaware of the cost of victory. But there is a pleasure in watching a dishonest plan unravel with the kind of beautiful inevitability you only get when people believe themselves cleverer than they are. Outside the courthouse, cameras chased stories toward the steps, and I felt the press smell of cinnamon and suspicion. Miranda was nowhere to be found. Good. The last I'd seen, she was still lounging under a spa towel, believing boarders were a background noise. Boarders, as it happens, are surprisingly loud when legal notices are involved. My lawyers had quietly flagged questions about her immigration status. Not to celebrate hardship, but because the truth has a way of reshaping lives. She'd spoken of registering me in a mental institution in one overheard conversation. In another, she'd freely admitted intent to use marriage and children to secure status. The authorities who handle such matters do not enjoy surprises, they enjoy facts. I arranged for Ethan and me to talk in the small cafe across the street after the hearing. He slid into the booth, the weight of the day folding his shoulders. "I am so sorry," he said, and it was the kind of apology you cannot schedule. It was the kind that arrives late and earnest. "You were tempted," I said. "You were flattered. That's human. But you were also reckless." He nodded. "Dad said it was a chance to help the company. He said he'd be..." He stopped. The man who used to call me Barbie, with a grin, looked like he might cry. "He said he would protect me. And he did protect himself," I said. "He protected his ego and left the rest to burn." I reached across the small table and took his hand. It felt like holding a delicate, expensive model truck, something I'd trained with love and stubbornness. "You can help fix this, Ethan. Stand with me. Tell what you know. Help us undo this." He swallowed and gave me a short nod. "I will," he said. "I don't want to be the son who broke you." We left the cafe with the day still fast and a verdict pending in the court of public scrutiny. People whispered. Friends who'd been polite at harvest dinners called to ask about stability. Vendors who had once sent me holiday ham as thanks began to send notes with cautious warmth. Business is about trust, and trust is the kind of currency that can evaporate overnight. That evening, when I unlocked the back door, a man stood under the porch light, pale and stiff as an accusation. "Russell." He had snow on his coat and a look I didn't recognize, something like shame with an outfit of need. "Barbie," he said without the old frivolousness. "Can we talk?" He expected to charm, perhaps to bargain. He didn't expect me to be so tired of bargains that my patience had become a weapon. I let him in because I am not a monster and because his presence needed to be seen for what it was. A man asking for help from the one he had tried to betray. He sat at my kitchen table, hands clasped like a man praying for less. "I tried to stop it," he said. "I thought if I nudged things I could control it. I was wrong." The words came without flourish, small and ugly. "Alvarez is dangerous. He promised me a role in whatever comes after Barb. I wanted it. I thought if my son had a title it would make him proud. I didn't think about the cost." "You always think about your costs first," I said. "That's been your failing since before we divorced." My tone was clinical because I had learned that tenderness is a currency you cannot spend on betrayers. He winced, and for a second I saw the man who had once made me laugh until my sides hurt. "I know, and I hate myself for it. But He flinched as if the sentence hurt. "I can help. I can give you the names you need. I can show where the shell companies have been established. I can testify." That offer was a vase sliding toward the edge of a table. It could break and splash truth everywhere, or it could be a trick. "Why?" I asked. "Because even men like Russell have a brittle place that cracks. His son." "Because Ethan is my son," he said simply. And I thought I could fix what I started. There was an honesty there I had not expected, and perhaps did not entirely trust. "I won't forgive you for the past," I said. But I will accept the truth if it helps stop this. My voice softened in a way that surprised me both times and did not erase the steel. He nodded. I'll tell. I'll sign affidavits. I will stand in court and answer for my name. I'll do whatever it takes to keep my boy from going to prison and to stop Alvarez. It was a bargain with consequences. If true, his testimony could blow the whole scheme wide open. If false, it was theater. I set my mug down and watched steam curl into the kitchen light. Do it cleanly, I said. No theatrics. No lies. No protections that leave me blind later. He swallowed. I understand. We did not hug. We did not pretend there was anything left to be fixed other than the damage. But he left with a promise to meet my lawyers at dawn and a look like a man who had finally found the one thing he'd been missing for 40 years. The knowledge of what mattered. That night I couldn't sleep, not because fear kept me awake, but because the chessboard had shifted in a way that even I, fan of surprises though I am, hadn't fully intended. Russell's cooperation could mean salvation for Ethan. It could also mean Russell's ruin. There is a mercy in exposing thieves, and a cruelty in letting the man who taught your child to lie keep his freedom. Outside, the snow muffled the world. Inside, my house hummed with the low electric of a war that was about to enter its loudest phase. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the window, watching the streetlights smear the snow into gold. I thought of Jack's hands on mine that morning, of Sam and Peter working until dawn, of my son sitting on a witness stand and telling the truth like an offering. I also thought, with a small guilty amusement, of the fact that this whole mess had started with a hair salon and a loud-voiced woman who thought herself clever. Life has a sense of humor about turning ordinary places into battlefields. And in that window, leaning on the sill, I promised myself, quietly, fiercely, that when the dust settled, if there was a man brave enough to stay and honest enough to love me properly, I might finally choose differently than I had at 20. For now, though, there were papers to sign, testimonies to arrange, and a son to save from the consequences of his own ambition. The war was not over. It had only just learned how loud my voice could be. Dawn came like a summons. I was already dressed in a steel gray suit, hair set sharp enough to slice bread, when Russell knocked again, this time with none of the swagger, none of the aftershave. Just a man and a folder fat with names and numbers. He handed it to Sam like a schoolboy delivering late homework. Sam flipped through, his lawyer eyes widening at every page. This is a roadmap, he muttered. Shell companies, wire transfers, bank officers who looked the other way. Alvarez's fingerprints everywhere. Russell sat down heavily, staring at the coffee I placed in front of him. He didn't drink. His hands shook too much. If I testify, they'll come after me. I leaned forward, my voice low. Russell, you spent 40 years chasing after women and shortcuts. If this is the one good thing you do, let it be for Ethan. Not for me. For your son. He nodded, the motion small but final. By noon we were back at the courthouse, filing Russell's sworn affidavit. The clerk raised an eyebrow at the list of names, but she stamped it all the same. In legal terms it was dynamite. In personal terms it was betrayal served back to the betrayer. That night I hosted a dinner. Not the kind with crystal and turkey, but the kind where war generals plan over stew and bread. Jack, Sam, Peter, Ethan, and yes, even Russell sat at my table. The air buzzed like static. Ethan barely touched his plate. He looked from me to his father, then back again. I don't know how to fix what I've done. By not doing it again, I said simply. By standing where you should have stood all along, Jack added. And by telling the truth even when it's ugly. His voice carried weight, and Ethan seemed to lean into it like a boy listening to his coach. Russell cleared his throat, and for once his tone held no charm, no pretense. Son, I led you wrong. I told you money was the only measure. I was wrong. His eyes flicked to me. Your mother built something real. I tried to buy shortcuts. Don't be me. The silence that followed was heavy but not hopeless. For the first time in months, Ethan looked like my boy again. Not the politician in training Miranda wanted. Not the puppet Alvarez tried to craft. My boy. The next morning headlines screamed. Donovan family feud goes public. Allegations of fraud, foreign backers named. Alvarez's polished face appeared on the evening news, denying everything with the arrogance of a man who thinks money erases paper trails. But we had Russell's affidavit, Ethan's testimony, and a stack of documents thicker than a Thanksgiving turkey. The tide was turning. Of course, snakes don't slither off quietly. That evening Miranda made her move. She waltzed into my office unannounced, heels sharp, perfume cloying. "Barbara," she said with that sugar-acid smile, "you don't know who you're up against. Alvarez doesn't lose. And if you drag me down with you, I'll make sure Ethan regrets ever calling you Mom." I stood slowly, smoothing my jacket. "Miranda, you played the wrong game. You thought you could out-talk me. But darling, I've outlived con men better than you, and I've buried them in paperwork." Her smile faltered just for a flicker. She set a hand on her stomach, theatrical as ever. "Maybe you don't care about me, but what if I'm carrying your grandchild?" It was a cheap shot and she knew it. I leaned across the desk until we were nose to nose. "Then you'd better pray it inherits my spine, not your greed. Because if you think dangling a baby is your last defense, you're already out of moves." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. I let out a long breath. Fear might have broken another woman, but for me it was fuel. If she was bluffing, I'd expose it. If she wasn't, well, the child of my son would not grow up in the shadow of a liar. That night, as snow whispered against the windows, Jack stayed late. We sat by the fire. The kind of quiet that isn't empty but alive with unspoken things. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Every time they corner you, you find a new way to turn." I sipped my wine, my lips quirking. That's what happens when you spend your life hauling freight and fools. You learn to maneuver. He reached for my hand, tentative but sure. "When this is over, Barbara, will you let yourself rest? Not retire. Just rest. With someone who's wanted you since you were 20? The fire cracked between us. For once I had no clever comeback. Only the warmth of his hand in mine. Steady and certain in a world that had spun too fast. But rest would have to wait. Because tomorrow was the creditors' meeting. And I knew Alvarez wouldn't let it pass without one last strike. The creditors' meeting was held in a bland hotel conference room, the kind with beige carpeting and bad coffee, but that day it felt like a coliseum. Every seat filled with eyes, vendors, bankers, board members, lawyers, hungry to see if the Donovan empire would collapse or claw its way back. I walked in first, heels clicking like a drumroll. My hair was immaculate, my suit sharp, my pearls deliberately understated. Let them whisper about my age. Let them speculate about my stability. I knew one thing they didn't. I had the receipts. Alvarez was already there, flanked by his polished lawyers and two men with necks thick enough to bend steel. He smiled at me like a shark who'd already tasted blood. Miranda sat at his side, looking smug in a navy-sheath dress, while Russell lingered near the back, pale but present. Ethan sat beside Sam and Peter, his hands clasped so tight they looked welded together. Jack stood in the corner, arms folded, steady as a stone wall. The chair opened the session with formalities. "We are here to discuss the financial status of Donovan Logistics, and to hear proposals regarding its future." Alvarez's lawyer stood first, smooth as silk. "The evidence is clear. The company is insolvent, mismanaged. Mr. Alvarez is prepared to offer a rescue package, generous terms, immediate liquidity, preservation of jobs. But it requires a change in leadership. Mrs. Donovan must step aside." Whispers rippled. Some heads nodded. The air thickened with anticipation. Then it was my turn. I stood unhurried and slid a folder across the table. "Before we discuss rescue, perhaps we should discuss fraud. Forged authorizations. Shell companies siphoning funds. Astor Logistics, for example, run by Alvarez's proxies, with payments guaranteed by Russell Donovan." Gasps fluttered around the room. Alvarez's smile froze just a hair too stiff. Sam rose next, his lawyer's cadence crisp. "We've traced the transfers. Here bank records. Here affidavits. Here testimony from Ethan Donovan himself confirming manipulation and coercion. And here," he tapped Russell's affidavit, "a sworn statement naming Mr. Alvarez as the architect." Russell's head dropped, but he didn't deny it. Alvarez tried to laugh it off. Conspiracy theories. Fabrications. That's when Peter dropped the hammer. He projected the forged email, the one with my signature, onto the screen. Then, with almost theatrical timing, he displayed the IP log. This was sent from a cafe Wi-Fi. The login came from an account tied to Mr. Russell Donovan under instructions from Alvarez's associates. The metadata doesn't lie. The room buzzed like a hive. A banker whispered, "Forgery? That's federal." Another muttered, "If this is true, Alvarez is radioactive." I leaned forward, voice low but clear. "This company isn't failing. It's being sabotaged. And I will not step aside. Not for thieves. Not for liars. Not even for my own blood." The words hung in the air like steel cables. Ethan flinched, but he held his seat. Russell's face was gray. Miranda shifted in her chair, her confidence cracking. Then Alvarez made his mistake. He slammed his hand on the table and snarled, "Do you really think anyone will believe an old woman over me?" That did it. I smiled slow and sharp. "Oh, darling. They already do." Sam handed the judge a motion for emergency protective orders. The creditors murmured their assent. Vendors nodded. Some even clapped. The board chair cleared his throat, clearly rattled. "Pending investigation, Alvarez's proposal is withdrawn. Donovan Logistics remains under current leadership." Victory doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a murmur, a ripple of relief, a look in a banker's eyes that says, "We trust you again." That was the sound I heard as the gavel came down. Alvarez stood, furious, and stalked out with his entourage. Miranda followed, her face twisted with rage. But at the door she turned and hissed at me, "You haven't seen the last of me." I almost laughed. "Sweetheart," I said, "I hope not. I still owe you a lesson." When the room cleared, Ethan came to me, trembling. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I put a hand on his cheek. "Sorry doesn't fix everything. But today you chose right. Hold on to that." Russell lingered, looking at me like a man who had just realized the price of his sins. "Barbara," he began, but I cut him off. "Save it. You wanted to be the hero in your son's eyes. You ended up proving why I divorced you." He flinched, but he didn't argue. Later that night, back at my house, Jack poured me a drink. "You were magnificent," he said. I sank into my chair, finally letting the exhaustion show. Magnificent, maybe. But the war isn't over. Alvarez doesn't lose quietly. Miranda's still out there. And Russell. I paused, shaking my head. He's a wild card. He'll either crawl back for redemption or burn everything on his way down. Jack took my hand across the table, his thumb brushing mine. "Then let's be ready. Together." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to imagine it. An ending not written in courts and betrayals but in vows. But that, I knew, would come later. First I had to finish this war. Because Alvarez wasn't done. And neither was I. Alvarez didn't take humiliation lightly. Men like him never do. When a lifetime of intimidation starts to slip, they thrash. They claw. They make desperate, ugly moves. It came 2 nights after the creditors' meeting. A black SUV parked across from my house, lights off. I noticed it because I always notice. That's the blessing of years of running trucks across counties. You learn to see who doesn't belong. The call came an hour later. No hello. Just Alvarez's voice, smooth as oil on tile. "You've embarrassed me, Senora." That was unwise. I sipped my tea. "Oh, Alvarez, I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself." I just held up the mirror. "You'll regret this," he said. "Accidents happen. Investigations can change direction. People disappear." "Then disappear yourself," I said sweetly and hung up. But I wasn't naive. I called Jack, and within 20 minutes he and Sam were at my door. Peter was already filing emergency motions, weaving a net so tight Alvarez couldn't wriggle through. We knew the man would strike, so we gave him a stage and waited for him to stumble. The stumble came at a Chamber of Commerce luncheon. Alvarez, arrogant enough to believe money could buy reputation back, showed up in his 3-piece suit with Miranda on his arm. She was radiant in red, smug as a queen, as if the creditors' meeting had been a minor hiccup. I arrived deliberately late, every eye swiveling as I crossed the room. My entrance wasn't subtle, it was strategy. A woman people underestimate needs to remind them, once in a while, that underestimation is lethal. Alvarez took the podium during dessert. "Donovan Logistics is in transition," he said, his accent wrapped in charm. "But the community must know. I am here to invest, to secure jobs, to build the future. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the room was still his. I stood slowly, lifting a hand. Excuse me, I said, voice calm but carrying. Before you invest in our community, perhaps you should explain these. Sam clicked his laptop, and the projector filled the wall with documents. Bank wires, shell company registrations, Russell's sworn affidavit, Ethan's testimony, even the forged email traced back to Alvarez's own lieutenant. A collective gasp ran through the room like a wave breaking on rocks. Alvarez froze. Miranda, for once, couldn't keep her mask on. She blurted. Those were supposed to be destroyed. The silence that followed was biblical. Every head turned toward her. Every camera phone lifted. Her voice had betrayed them more perfectly than any affidavit could. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Thank you, Miranda. I couldn't have put it better myself. Chaos erupted. Reporters swarmed. Alvarez's lawyers tried to shut down the projector. Miranda screamed at them, at Alvarez, at Ethan, at me. Her voice cracked into a shrill confession of greed and schemes, all of it captured on half a dozen live feeds. Within hours, federal agents had moved in. Alvarez was led out in handcuffs, face twisted in fury. Miranda tried to cling to him, sobbing about her future in America. But one of the officers gently peeled her away. Her visa status, suddenly in question, became the least of her worries compared to the fraud charges. Russell, who had been in the back of the room, slumped like a man watching his own obituary being written. He caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I gave him nothing in return. By evening, the news was everywhere. Alvarez arrested in fraud probe. Donovan logistics vindicated. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Vendors called with congratulations, bankers with apologies, and women I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages that read simply, "You did it." Back at my house, Jack poured champagne. His sons toasted me like I was a general returning from battle. Ethan sat quietly, shame and relief warring across his face. "To Barbara," Jack said, raising his glass. "The woman who doesn't just survive the storm. She teaches it how to reign." I laughed loud and free, the kind of laugh that tastes like victory. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of betrayal slide off my shoulders, leaving only strength behind. But even in that joy, I knew one chapter remained. Russell. He wasn't in handcuffs yet, but he wasn't innocent either. And I would have to decide. Bury him completely, or let him crawl away with what scraps of dignity he could gather. As I sipped my champagne, Jack leaned close, his voice low. "Barbara, when this is finished, there's something I want to ask you. Something I've wanted to ask for 40 years. I smiled, my heart beating faster than I cared to admit. "Then ask me when the smoke clears, Jack. Not before. Because first, I had to face the man who'd once been my husband, and decide whether to end him, or forgive him just enough to let him live with his regret." Russell showed up at my door 2 days after Alvarez's arrest. No cameras, no lawyers, no folder of excuses. Just Russell. Aged, crumpled, the shine rubbed off him like cheap polish. "Barbara," he said, voice rough. "You destroyed him. You destroyed all of it." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "No, Russell. I destroyed the noose you put around my neck. Alvarez tied the knot, but you handed him the rope." He flinched. "I gave testimony. I helped. You helped yourself when it was convenient. Don't rewrite the script." My tone was sharper than I intended, but truth often cuts that way. He stepped closer, desperation swimming in his eyes. "I made mistakes. But we had something once, didn't we? Before the money, before the lies? Don't tell me you never think about it." I let silence stretch, watching him squirm. "Of course I think about it. That's why I left. Because I deserved better. Still do." He swallowed, then whispered, "I still love you." I almost laughed, but pity stopped me. "Russell, you don't love me. You love the idea that I'd still save you. But I've retired from saving men who set fire to their own futures. You'll have to carry your regret yourself." I shut the door. Not slammed. Not soft. Final. The company rebounded like a freight truck roaring uphill. Vendors rallied, bankers signed on again, and the employees, the real backbone, cheered when I walked the floor. The whispers about my stability evaporated, replaced with headlines. Barbara Donovan outsmarts international fraud ring. Miranda, Deported. A photo surfaced online of her boarding a plane, sunglasses hiding nothing, a scowl etched across her perfect cheekbones. Ethan didn't attend. He said he didn't need to see her again. I agreed. Ethan chose to stay. He came into my office one morning, face pale but resolute. I don't deserve a second chance, Mom. But I want one. I want to learn how to run this the right way. From you. I studied him, my son who had nearly been my betrayer. Then start at the bottom, I said. Ride with the drivers. Learn the routes. Talk less, listen more. He nodded, grateful. For the first time in months, I believed he meant it. Weeks later, on a quiet winter evening, Jack invited me to dinner. No war councils, no files spread across the table. Just roast chicken, candles, and the warmth of his hand brushing mine. When dessert was cleared, he stood, awkward, endearing, and pulled a small box from his pocket. Barbara, he said, voice steady but eyes bright. I've waited 40 years to ask you this. Will you marry me? For a moment I saw every road not taken, every regret, every what if. And then I saw him, not the friend, not the ally, not the man I almost chose, but the one who had stood beside me when the world tried to break me. I laughed through tears I hadn't expected. Yes, Jack. Yes. The wedding was small but radiant. Friends, allies, employees who had become family. Jack's sons called me Mom during their toasts, though I never asked them to. My son Ethan stood quietly at the back, no fiancé on his arm, but a look of pride in his eyes that I hadn't seen since he was a boy showing me his first science project. There were many guests, but not Russell. He sent a letter I didn't read. Some absences are gifts. As I walked down the aisle, I thought of Miranda's voice in that hair salon, the arrogance, the scheming, and how it had sparked this fire. She had wanted me erased. Instead, I stood taller, stronger, crowned not by fear but by choice. At the reception, Jack leaned close, whispering into my ear, "You won, Barbara." I smiled, glass raised, laughter bubbling up. I always do. And that was the truth. Because in the end, not all the sons we give birth to. Sometimes the real family we build is made of loyalty, of love, of people who see us not as prey to be devoured but as queens who cannot be toppled.